Rosh Hashannah is coming up, and we traditionally have a round challah, so to represent, may our year be filled with never-ending good. I have created a challah that is filled with good. It is a beautiful round challah filled with apples, candied apples, and then shaped in such a way that it creates a Jewish star in the middle. So why don't we first just look at making the dough. Here what we're going to do. I've got 5 cups of flour, of bread flour. Already that I measured out. Okay? And then we need 2 cups of whole wheat flour. You can use all white flour if you want to. I know for the holidays, traditionally, Hidur Mitzvah, we're supposed to use the best flour available, and you certainly can do so, but I wanted to give you an option that had a little bit more rustic feel and a little bit more of a feel for fall. So I'm going to aerate my flour, scoop up more than I need, and I use actually the back of my spatula to just level it off. There's 1 cup and then 2 cups of whole wheat flour. The recipe calls for 8 cups of flour, more or less, usually less. But in using rapid rise yeast, you add all the flour in your recipe minus 1 cup. So what I will do is I will have my 1 cup of extra cup of regular bread flour, white bread flour, waiting for me. And in the bowl with the 2 flours, I'm adding my yeast, my salt, and a teaspoon of cinnamon. Turn your mixer on just for a minute, or a few seconds, not a minute or so, just to combine your yeast with your flours. You want to do this so that your liquid, your warm liquid, will not kill off the yeast if it was sitting right on the top. That's all you need to do. Now we need to go over to the stove and see how we're going to heat up our liquid mixture. I'm adding apple cider, or you can use apple juice, to the sugar. Stir to combine, turn on the heat, stir until the sugar goes into solution, and then check your temperature to make sure it goes to about 125 degrees. Turn your mixer on to low, add your hot liquid first, then add your eggs, then add your oil. You do this because the flour will be coated with the oil if you add the oil first and won't absorb all the moisture as readily. See how it's all liquidy in the center? Use your spatula to scrape down the sides of the bowl to get the flour incorporated. This recipe calls for a total of close to 8 cups of flour. This is, as you can see, an old mixer, but it's still working. But more than 8 cups of flour, most mixers can handle. So if you want to do a double recipe, then do it twice. It doesn't take long if you have everything pre-measured and ready to go. See? Now I still see lots of flour on the bottom, so I can stop for a minute. Get the flour up from the bottom. Because if you don't, you think your mixture is too sticky, you tend to add too much flour to your bowl, and then ultimately you've added too much flour to your batter. And in a minute or so I will show you exactly how to determine if your batter is the right consistency. See how it's starting to pull away, getting all the flour that I've mixed together. This is important. If you're not using a machine and you're kneading by hand, figure on kneading for about 6 to 10 minutes, depending on how strenuously you knead. The other thing is to make sure that there is enough flour on the board, because you don't want too much, but you want enough so that the dough doesn't stick. The dough will always be a little sticky. Now see, it's forming a nice ball already, but I'm going to add, whoop, I used to say this a tax. Now remember, this is essentially the 1/8 cup of flour. But I'm not going to add any more just yet. And I'm going to let this knead for about 6 minutes. I see that it's sticking to the bowl a little on the bottom, so I'm going to add a little bit more. I think this recipe really takes about 7½ cups, but it depends on the day. If it's a very moist day, it will probably take all 8 cups of flour. It is better to err on the side of less flour than more, because as the dough sits and rises, it will also absorb some of the moisture. The flour will absorb some of the moisture. Okay, I'm going to stop this for a minute. Well, no, I actually don't have to stop it. The dough is working its way up on the beater. A mess to clean, but no problem with your bread. Okay. While that is mixing, I will prepare the bowl. If you're making the dough the day in advance, you can add a little bit of oil to a 2-gallon Ziploc bag and add the oil and move it around a little with your hand. Put your dough in the bag and then put it in the refrigerator. It will rise overnight, so you don't have to do everything the last minute. But since I'm doing this here for you, I'm going to put a little oil on my paper towel. Actually, I'm going to pour a teeny bit of oil into the bowl. Very small amount. Just a very small amount. But it's enough to really coat the bowl well. Okay, so my bowl's ready. Let's see how my bread is doing. It's looking good. See how it's much smoother? It's more satin look. Like making a pot. You can take your dough and pull it down away from the top. Let's take a look at the dough for a minute. Feels a little sticky, but it's not sticking to my fingers. The way you really test to see if dough is done is put your fingers into a little bit of flour and then touch your dough. If it feels not sticky at all, your dough is done. It's ready to rise. And use your strong spatula for this, folks. It smells delicious. Between the cinnamon and the apple cider and a little bit of whole wheat flour. And you can use this dough for anything. You can use it for your 6-bread challah. You can use it for coffee cake. Whoop, look at that. But you see, if the hands are floured, it wouldn't matter. Get all the dough in. Whoop. By the way, that stretchiness in those strands That is actually the gluten in your flour. That's what's giving your bread structure. Okay, that's good enough. Just take it out. Flour my hand just a teeny bit. Turn it over in the bowl so that both sides are coated. Cover it with saran and leave it in a warm place. A lesson I learned a long time ago, don't put it on the back of your stove when your oven is working because you think, oh, the warm air is coming through. That warm air will actually cook part of the dough in your ball. Take a look at this dough. Isn't that beautiful? Now, if I were to use this dough completely for one round challah, it probably would come out this big, and I'm not sure it would totally rise in this, be cooked in the center. It would definitely rise. So we're going to use half the dough. But let's take a look at, and then I'll show you a surprise afterwards. Let's take a look at this. How do you know your dough is ready? Well, it's doubled in size. You've got the air bubbles, but if you punch a hole in it with your fingers and it recedes, then you know you're fine. Now, look, all those lines are gluten. Some of you might not like it, but it's what's making our dough and our bread rise beautifully. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flour my board. In this case, I think I'm going to, this is what I call heavenly flour, the board. I'm going to take it out. And I'm going to cut it in half. Let that dough rest. This half, I'm going to cut into fourths, because I want 4 equal pieces. It's handling beautifully. Oh, I love it. Now, each one of these pieces I'm going to roll out into a circle. Don't panic if it doesn't quite look like a good circle, because we'll shape it with our hands later. Lightly flour your rolling pin to make sure it won't stick to the dough. Turn it over if you need to. There you go. And then I'm rolling it out. It's about an 8-inch circle. Now remember, this is half the dough. Don't worry about the tail. We will take care of it. And I'm going to place it right on my parchment paper on my cookie sheet. Now I'm going to take some of my apple mixture. This apple mixture is 2 apples that I've diced into quarters, 1/4-inch pieces. The apple is cut into 1/4-inch cubes, then sauteed with a little bit of brown sugar. The sugar makes it give up its juices. It's only thickened with a little bit of cornstarch or arrowroot starch, whatever you like to use, to bind it together. And then it's got cinnamon and nutmeg and allspice in it. And so that is it. But we wanted to cook it down so that the mixture is not too wet. If you have a bent edge spatula, use it. It makes it easier for spreading. But I've made it where I've just spread it with a spoon and did the best I could. You don't have to worry about it going all the way to the sides. Just want to coat it. Now, as I'm rolling out the other circles, the dough will be rising a little. Again, don't worry about it. Flour the board. roll out my dough. Taste the dough, take the dough, put it on top, match up the edges a little bit. Take some more of the apple mixture. Now you can use more, I'm using a little bit more apples because this is really enough for one large one. But you don't want to get too crazy with it because if you do, it'll start oozing out more than you want. And I have done this, by the way, with Nutella, or I have done it with, you know, the Israeli chocolate spread, the Parva chocolate spread. So you can do whatever you want, but for Rosh Hashannah, when we want a sweet and fruitful year, I'm filling my bread with apples. Again, people always ask me what's the right type of rolling pin to use. It's the one that you feel most comfortable with. When you're more experienced, you can use one without handles because your hands know how much pressure to put on. But the rolling pins that you can often find, and you probably own with the handles with the ball bearings in it, are good because that way you get a uniform pressure. See, that one's nice. See, and one of the reasons this one is easier to roll out than the others is because it's had a chance to rest. The gluten has had a chance to rest. I always joke, I said, you know, gluten is like treating your children when you have to wake them up for school. If you come into their room and you go over and you gently nudge them and you give them a kiss on the kepi and you say, honey, it's time for school, you know, your child might go, oh, I don't want to go. But if you go into their room, turn on the light, throw off the covers, and go, get out of bed, you got to go to school. They're going to go, leave me alone. They're going to recoil. And the gluten in flour reacts the same way. So you want to treat it gently. So this had a chance to rest. This had a chance to rest. And look at the difference. It's much easier to roll. So now I'm taking, I don't want to get too crazy. There's a little left. That could be for Nosh. Yeah, maybe it isn't for Nosh, because I need to get this edge, otherwise my pretty design won't show up. Okay, now here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take the dough, and if you can see, I'm going to match up all the edges and pinch together. Make sure the bottom one comes up, second one, pinch together. Pinch together. Same over here. Now you're only halfway done. And you want to get the bottom layer to match the top layers so that everything can be sealed up nicely. Now, I'm going to take something that's round, place it in the center, and just press down so I have a mark. That's all I need. Now I'm taking a sharp knife, and I know you're capable of doing a lot of good things, but measuring out around 12 times, starting in one place and ending, is not always the best thing to do. So what I want you to do is think of this like a clock. Make your first cut at 6 o'clock, all the way through to the bottom. If you need to, you can even flour your knife a little. Make your second cut at 12 o'clock. Now, for purposes of the camera, I'm doing it that way. Feel free to turn your pan around. See, so now I know that I have 4 equal sections. I can eyeball a third of each. You see this? And basically what we're doing is creating 12 sections, just like a clock. Whoop, it's giving away the secret. And even though I've cut all the way down to the end, I might have to cut open a little bit. Last 2. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to work with 2 at a time. We're going to lift up 2 sections, make sure they're separated from everybody, and then turn away from each other and place it down and pinch together. Okay? Lift up the next 2. Turn, pinch together. Lift up the next 2. Turn and pinch together. Lift up. Ooh, sticky, sticky. You know your dough is moist when it sticks to parchment paper. Okay. And each other. Here we go. Lift up, turn away, pinch together. And for the last 2, lift up, turn away from each other, pinch the bottoms together. Last one. I'm going to pinch all the sections together. Tuck it under to make sure it looks good. And look, you have a Jewish star right in the middle of your round challah. Now, if you think it looks good now, wait till you see it when it comes out of the oven. Before I bake it, I will brush it with a little bit of egg wash. I used to put a little teeny bit of honey in my egg wash, but I'm concerned that especially with something that's filled like this and has to bake for a while, the honey tends to caramelize very fast, and so it makes it look darker or almost burnt when it's not burnt. So that's your choice. Certainly with a regular challah you can do that, but here we'll just do it plain. We're going to let it rise for about 20 minutes. Put it in a 325, 350 degree oven. You know your oven better than I do. And bake it probably for about 25 minutes, maybe 30 because it's completely filled and it's more dense in the center. Here's our Rosh Hashannah, beautiful challah. May you have a good and healthy and a happy year.